Can we make a secret?
We are here to talk about They Talk. This one is directed by Giorgio Bruno and is a 2021 Italian movie, although it is spoken in English language. Bruno actually kind of co-wrote the movie along with two others as well. Now, I was sent this as a screener knowing next to nothing about it, because that's generally how kind of screeners work. They're just going to turn up without really knowing about the movie. So let me tell you my experience of watching this movie and how I would kind of best kind of parallel with it with another kind of situation. So imagine, if you will, my friends, that you are on a blind date. Yes, you're sat at a restaurant waiting for a date that you have no idea what they look like or what they're going to be like. And you're sat there ready and waiting, expectations kind of like me, you know, whatever. You've been on a few of these blind dates before and they kind of pretty much are all disappointing. But all of a sudden, in walks possibly one of the most beautiful images you've seen. And the presentation of this person is impeccable. Hair, makeup if applicable, the way they are dressed, they look gorgeous. And you are astounded. You were not expecting this. You were not expecting such an impressive presentation. They sit down in front of you and it starts off pretty well. They seem like pretty interesting, having a kind of an interesting intro, a little kind of banter here and there, and it kind of, this sounds like it could be pretty good. And you continue to be amazed about the kind of the presentation of this person. But all of a sudden, this person starts going beep, 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 occasionally looking at you and then looking back. Beep, boop, beep. Well, that's kind of my experience with this movie. I'll explain why in just a minute. But let me tell you about the plot of They Talk. So, it focuses on a group of documentary filmmakers. Well, it focuses on one guy who happens to be a crew in the this kind of film crew, and he's the sound guy. And they're out filming in this particular area in the woods somewhere, and this happens to be near an orphanage where he grew up with a couple of other people. And whilst they are filming, they kind of pick up this strange kind of sound, and it seems to affect this guy especially kind of, you know, harshly, causing kind of, you know, fierce kind of ringing in his ears. And he manages to pick up on his recordings this kind of strange, what seems like a voice, possibly even giving him a message. And he kind of looks further into it. No one else kind of really kind of believes him and everything. They just think it's interference. But he believes this is possibly messages from beyond the grave. And it may well link back to his past. But people can still continue not to believe him. So he kind of has to seek help elsewhere from a specialist who happens to be kind of in the area, and maybe along with an old friend as well. Now, what will happen? You'll have to watch the movie to find out. So, let's discuss what I meant and what I thought about this movie. So, okay, so I get a lot of screeners, and more often than not, they're kind of low budget, and some are okay, some are kind of disappointing. My expectations are normally reasonably low, and I like to be pleasantly surprised. But when I first put this movie on, I was astounded about the quality of the technical ability in this movie. I have to say, the direction in regards to things like, you know, the photography, the cinematography, the framing, the composition of shots was truly outstanding. And I'm not using hyperbole. I genuinely mean this movie was incredibly well shot. Really crisply made, professional sheen to it. Every shot I felt was chosen, you know, down to the kind of what would be the perfect shot for this particular scene. And it was shot in a way that really kind of, I think, benefited using kind of the environment to enhance the shot, you know, things in the foreground, you know, certain kind of angles and things like that to kind of enhance the viewing experience. I was thinking, man, this movie is shot so well. It looks incredible. And then not only that, our lead actor, I think, is very compelling. Now, these are, as I say, this is an Italian movie, but people are speaking in English. And our lead actor, I've got to say, did a very, very good performance. I was quite impressed, giving a believable performance for a guy who looks genuinely kind of shocked about kind of what's going on. I kind of quite enjoyed his kind of reaction to it. Not only that, we do see some supernatural kind of elements that are on screen, and they're handled very well. And they look incredible in regards to kind of like, for a low budget movie in regards to VFX and practical makeup, and just kind of the way some of these kind of shots are portrayed, with religious iconography and the set design, things like this, looks fantastic. This movie genuinely is one of the best looking kind of lower budget independent productions I've seen in recent years. It legitimately is. So that all sounds pretty good. But what was I talking about with the kind of the weird noises? Here's my issue with this movie. The biggest issue by far and away is the script. Because after, if we park the kind of like the aesthetics, which are fantastic, but we'll park them. And I've got to say, I think the movie starts off pretty well. But after that, after the initial kind of, I would say 15, 20 minutes of the movie maybe, it starts to kind of meander. And then kind of like just seem to labour on points or be somewhat contrived, somewhat confusing even in regard to kind of the plot. But doesn't really seem to move forward a hell of a lot, and just seems to kind of retread or reinterpret kind of things that were done earlier in the movie. And things happen within this plot that I just think I don't really understand what's happening here. Some minor things, like for example, we have this our main sort of character and his kind of girlfriend just seem to want to drop trowel and shag at the kind of the most inopportune time. Oh my god, I've had this really tragic thing. Let's get naked and have sex. Like more than once. I'm thinking, what? And that's a minor thing. I don't want to give any kind of spoilers away. But the movie has this kind of like, really labours on these kind of like particular points. And you don't really feel like you're getting a hell of a lot of full momentum. And then when we kind of do get kind of what I would consider more major plot points kind of seem to happen, you don't really know why it's happening. And then the kind of, as we go towards the end of the movie, it ends on a point where I was just thinking, I just don't know why that happened. So the actual plotting of this movie is the main problem. Maybe because it's got 3 script writers, the movie has ended up being a little confused, and because it's of such a proficiently made on a technical level, I was thinking, am I missing something here? And I checked out a couple of other reviews, and it was kind of the same sort of thing, to be honest. So it's not just me, although you tell me if you think this movie made 100% sense to you. So I felt this movie was kind of, visually it's, I mean, it's not like lots of set pieces and stuff, but it just looks so well made. But it's just, unfortunately, the movie that it's trying to tell is just a confused kind of like mess, with the occasional kind of like sequences that I think are kind of, are quite interesting. But for the most part, it's either kind of, you feel like it's just spinning its wheels, or it's just a confusing mess. So that is the problem with this movie's, well, the main problem. The other problem I gotta say is I think some of the acting from some of the smaller parts aren't particularly good. We get this guy like the director of the kind of the documentary, this guy called, I think it's Steve, and I'm thinking, oh god, please don't let him be on screen for much longer. Thank god he isn't. But like terrible kind of like, oh god, it's just painful to watch sometimes. But yeah, there's some kind of dodgy acting, to be honest. And then we have these kind of flashback sequences that, it's kind of a little bit cliche and a little bit kind of too over stylized at times possibly, and ends up being like somewhat kind of like a typical kind of thing that these horror movies kind of do. I think the movie's trying to have this kind of interesting plot, but it's just convoluted, unfortunately. Again, things like this, I always think this is really a producer's job to kind of like push back on stuff. and kind of get it fixed. I could have dealt with the kind of the dodgy acting had the script been a little better here, but unfortunately for me the script is the worst part of this movie, which makes it from a visually kind of genuinely interesting movie to watch to a kind of a little bit of a slog and a mundane. And I think it keeps its head above water just by the aesthetics and the strong leading performance from our main character. But you know, I can't put this above a 5 because I just don't think it's a good movie in regard to its narrative, its forward momentum, its plot and things like that, and obviously a couple of other small elements. So I can only really give this a 5. I can't go above that and say it's an above average film because it's let down by some serious narrative issues. So I'll give it a 5, but it's a case of two halves of this movie. Aesthetically, I think it's fantastic. But kind of sense-wise, it's just out the window. So that is my review. It's a 5 out of 10. Have you seen it? What do you think of my thoughts on it? Leave me a comment, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.